Good afternoon, participants. This is your host Satyajit Sen from Economic Times, welcoming you all to today's live webinar titled "The Content Consumption Study," brought to you by ET Brand Equity and GoToWebinar by LogMeIn. Welcome all. So today's webinar is basically understanding how content consumption is happening in today's world. Is your content not getting the traction you want? Have you read a quintillion blog posts on content production, but your results are still unimpressive? Well, how about asking your audience what really grabs their attention and resonates with them? In today's webinar, we shall learn the how-tos of understanding the trends of how your content is being consumed around the world. Today's webinar will also help us to learn what kind of content generates greater user engagement, how to engage better with the audience from the start, what to do and not to do to retain the audience attention, planning the webinar content to keep the audience glued till the end, how to generate maximum traction through rich content and graphics, how to create result-oriented content keeping in mind audience interests, and the key insights derived from a recent webinar's user surveys. And to help us understand this better, today we have Mr. Inigo Praveen, Business Unit Head, Collaboration and Communications, LogMeIn. He has spent more than 10 years in the technology domain with senior roles in consulting and conferencing across multiple geographic locations. So welcome Inigo. It's great to have you on the webinar today. And before Thanks. And before handing it over to Inigo, we would like to inform our participants that we'll open up the Q&A session after Inigo's session. However, please feel free to post your questions during the course of the webinar. So handing it over to Inigo. Inigo, yours.
Thanks a lot, Shubhrajit, and good afternoon, all of you guys. It's been a pleasure to catch up with all of you again. I think the topic today is one of an exciting topics, and I think one of the perennial questions that all of you would have in your minds. Is my content be relative, and is it making sense to my target segment? And what we have done is we have done a study. So this eliminates the necessity for you to make assumptions, but this is reality of a study of over 3,000 professionals. And what we did is a study around their habits, preferences, and what motivates them to consume content, right? So something that we look at is the majority looking at scenarios around how does a content get motivated for a B2B customer, and how does it motivate somebody in a B2B, in a B2C space, right? A business to business and a business to consumer. So for a B2C, the motivations of consuming content are in these parameters. If you inspire them, 15% of them would consume your content. They want to be in the know. 10% of them want to be in the know. 16% want to find what is new. 7% of them want to seek insight, or they want to support their data or their inferences, and if your content is going to help them. But there are going to be about 18% of people who would want to seek entertainment from it. Some people who wanted to be updating this in a social platform as well. And some people want the content to be feeling good. So when I categorize this in order of priorities, the first one is to entertain. So as long as your content is entertaining for them, they're going to consume your content. So this is a top priority for you when you're addressing a B2C customer segment. The second one is they wanted to be updated, and they want to put it and tell their people socially. So this is a page from our director of GoToWebinar, and this is his Facebook page. So something that they would want in terms of content, something in terms of pictures, something in terms of visual content, which is going to help them. And this generation is more a curious generation. They want to go and find out new questions or answers for it. So it's as simple as going to Google, typing out a question and finding out an answer, right? So this is what ticks a B2C customer. Is it the same for a B2B? it is not exactly in the same order. So for a B2B consumer, the priority number one is to learn something new. It could be a knowledge, it could be skill, it could be more information in a particular domain, but top priority is to learn something new. Second is they want to be on current trends, they want to be updated on the industry trends, they want to know, which is more information that they seek, and they want to have fresh ideas. So you would find lots of content coming out in very niche segments like blockchain or AI, and AI in a particular segment, for example, AI in HR or AI in production. So B2B consumers have a different motivation, and the B2C consumers have a different motivation. And if I want to put that in a snapshot in one slide, the priorities are for a B2C consumer. He wants to be entertained. He needs to put that and update it socially, and he wants to find more things. So you will have to give them that space where they want to find it instead of you giving all the information. And the last thing on that for them is, I mean, they would not want to learn or hear something new. Whereas for a B2B consumer, learning something new is the top of his priority. And that's because of the professional needs. They want to be on top of their trends so that they could be in the thought leadership circles, and they need fresh ideas. The last one that they would need is to be entertained with some visual content or content which is not related to their field of expertise. So when content came out in terms of attitudes, and when we did the survey, this is across 3,200 odd professionals, and these were the two attitudes which stood out. There was one segment of people who said, I want content which is on demand, and I want to access it at my own time, at my own convenience. And the second one was, I need to have a content which has got a lot of visual elements. So if you're going to prepare some content, just have these two pointers very, very clearly. One is whatever you make live should also be available on demand for them, and they should access it at any given point in time from any device. So mobility is becoming another key aspect, which was one of the trends, but lower down. But what they were implying is they wanted to access content from any device and any place, and the content to have more visual elements. So now if you ask me a question stating, is this relevant to everybody, or is there a difference between how I push content to executives and push content to the other stakeholders? Yes, we seem to have a difference in the way that they consume it. So the biggest question is, how do I cater to an executive audience rather than the general public? So something that comes out very, very clearly is executives are craving variety. They want to have broader range of content and on different topics. What they also want to do is they place a very big emphasis on print media and on analyst reports. So anything that you're going to publish, if your content can have references to these, and it's going to make your content even more popular. And they don't want something which is shallow. They don't want a high level conversation on it. They would love to see some deep and rich content on it. What they are also look at is they would always place their trust in a vendor or a person. So as long as they like and they trust that person, the content is likely to be consumed more. And more importantly, they're going to take business decisions from your content. So your content needs to have actionable items or to-do lists so that they carry something out from those sessions. And more importantly, they consider the industry news as the most valuable content. So if you're going to be talking to an executive for a specific topic, try and add more industry news to it. So your content will become popular, as well as in the same, as well as in the way where they're going to consume it more. And more importantly, choose a topic that consistently stands out. If you want to make your content consumed by people and be a top hit, ensure that your topics are standing out very clearly. And over the course of this conversation, we will help you to design not only the content, but also how to have relevant topics and how will they increase your attendance as well as people joining your sessions. So number one trait for a content is relevancy. It should connect to the professional interests of your target segment. So what does that mean? Right? It should have a very catchy title. It should come from a person or a brand that somebody trusts. It should be timely and it should be topical. And importantly, if you're going to have the word of mouth where you're going to have high number of shares and likes, the employee advocacy part of it, it's going to become very relevant. So people are looking at it, right? An example of that would be we did this sometime back where my director, Mr. Voss, and a partner of us developed something called as your clinic for PowerPoint presentations. That was one of the most talked about topic on saying how do we create relevant slides and the content that we put in there. So it needs to be marketed. Again, it was one of the highly shared sessions. So something that you will have to look at, and it was done specifically to our audience who do presentations day in and day out. So that will help them also to be in sync with your content. It will also be engaging for them, and your content will be consumed the maximum. So what are the most valuable topics that you can talk about, right, in your content? First one is best practices or educational topics. As long as you build in this best practices or something like you should do this from a checklist standpoint, these topics will drive content. So these are scenarios on when we asked the consumers what are your valuable topics, these were the ones that they told us. Best practices, educational topics. Second, stats, research findings, the one that we are doing today. So this is a study and I'm going to publish the results of this. The moment you say that, there's going to be higher participation and you follow that up. And most third important, which is the industry news, which is adding it, making it more relevant to the team, and then saying, hey, this becomes very relevant to you because your industry is doing it or your peer group is doing it. Now that we have covered what the content needs to be and what the topics could be, let me help you building out how to build the right titles, right? And I would like to use a little of mythology here, right? Most of you would know this. This is the Harry Potter scenario. So let's assume I'm Harry Potter for a minute, and I'm going to run an elective course. And one of my intentions is to have 100 visitors who will need to select my course. And I'm going to be, my content is what is going to make me a star. I might still be Harry Potter, but unless my content is engaging, it's going to be, my course will not be the top selling course. So how do I do it, right? First is I should not have factual titles. Scenario like common practices in potion making. Very factual, my people might not like it. So I will end up losing 19 visits. So 19% of people would not even look at it, they will not even register for it. But if I just tweak this and use words like new discovery, like potion recipe boost concentration, that word new has got an ability to pull in people, and there'll be 16% more registrations and a lot more people attending my session. And on broad range of topics, you could offer entry level courses like potion making 101. You can also make blockchain 101. So which is going to drive more people. I'm going to have 31% more registrations on it. So if my registrations are more, I'm going to have more people attending it as well. And another topic is if I could add words like how to. If we made this topic as how to make your content more relevant to your stakeholders, we would have had even more people joining in. And that adds about 36%, right? And if your question is, hey, does it end here? Can I do something really drastic and then I can do something close to 100%? Yes, you could actually do that, right? If you use something like a list and specifically here where it says number 7 will blow you away, that kind of a hook is going to ensure your people not only register, but also a scenario they're going to stick till understanding what that number 7 is. So, and this can lead up to a scenario where it's going to have about 43% more registrations than your normal scenario. So if I could just club all these things together from just the topic standpoint, a small tweak in your topic can range an increase in registration from as small as 19% to as high as 70-80%. So imagine you're going to get close to about 100 odd percent more people. Just imagine the amount of consumption your content is going to have, the visibility it's going to create, and how popular it's going to make your company and you in your peer group and in your space. So now we have done with the title, right? And we have talked about what ticks a few people. So next is, how do I make my content, the essence of my content, being very relative to people? So something that we did is we went back to people and we started asking them, tell us some hallmarks or benchmarks of really good content. And what it gave us was, it gave us two things. It gave us things that people are looking forward to and things that people think that we should not be having in a content, right? So let me first start with things that people don't want, and we call this the cardinal sins of poor content. So first, too promotional. So any content if it's too promotional, people would not like it. Why? So people know that most of the scenarios somebody is always selling, right? And they are aware of it. But then if your content is always selling and always talking to your particular brand, then it's too promotional and it doesn't build trust. So until your content can build that trust with people, people are not going to like your content. Second cardinal sin, don't be too wordy. Too many words do not make it exciting for people. People want it to be to the point. Get to a point and stick to that particular point and drive content around it. If it can be simple, if it's complex, try and make it as simple as possible. Third, let it not be too high level. I know people bring into a scenario where you want to do thought leadership sessions. Your thought leadership session, if it's too high level, people are just going to miss it. They will not consume that content, whether it is live or whether it is on demand. And just remember, there's a very clear statistic that people want to consume the content at their own convenience. So, and that's going to drive your majority of your social media goodwill scenarios where people are going to pass on the word of the mouth. So all that is going to get a massive hit. So prepare some content which is practical and concrete, and it needs to be actionable. So as I told you when we discussed this scenario with executives and with other people, unless your content is going to have like a to-do list or things that they could pick up and put it into practice, your content will not be consumed. The fifth cardinal sin is it's in a very poor format or design. The sixth one is poor writing and delivery. So when we went back and asked them, why do you say that this is a cardinal sin? People came back and said it doesn't build credibility for that organization. If it's not done in a right manner and if they can't take care of grammatical mistakes, then it's going to be an issue. So be careful with the content that you are presenting, and if it needs to be in the right method and the right delivery. And something which needs to come out is to deliver on that promise. So like what we are doing today on the consumption study, as I'm giving out results, I would give out a cheat sheet at the end, which is something that you can pick up and start putting it into action. So unless you have an actionable item and have a consistent content throughout the presentation or the session that you're doing, you're going to have problems with people consuming it. Let me put this into a perspective, right? And just to give you an idea of how this is going to affect. So an average webinar viewing time, as per our analysis of 800 odd sessions that the platform has done, is the average viewing time for a webinar attendee is about 61 minutes. So which means you're going to get undivided, or let me say a highly focused attention for 61 minutes from your people. If it's too wordy, too high level, you're going to lose that entire 61 minutes. But if we can build the content, avoiding all those cardinal sins, then this 61 minutes is your ticket to fame. You can make content which is awesome, which can rock, and people can take actionable items from that, and then you will have a huger repeat audience attending all your sessions, and your brand will goes up. So now that we have discussed what are the cardinal sins, let me go into what are the virtues that people really want from a content, right? So some of the three virtues, so we categorize them, made it very simple so that it becomes easier for all of you to pick it up and start following. One is your content needs to be easy to understand. It doesn't have to be too high level. So as I told you, some scenarios like a blockchain or some topics like AI can really be dry, but you need to break it down into a scenario where it's easy to understand. It needs to be a bit of scenario of educational. So whether it's a B2B where learning something new is a top of his priority, or a B2C where he wants to go and find something, you need to have content specific to your target segment. If it's B2C, give them some information so that they could go and search, and it's going to make them look at and say, hey, it was a thought-provoking session rather than being a one-sided session, right? And third, this is something that we always see in every presentation. As long as it's entertaining, engaging, lots of visual content, people are going to love your content, right? Some examples of entertainment, right, which is key in the B2B and the B2C segment. So one is, we could say, hey, Star Wars episode 5, A New Hope, or an episode 6, Empire Strikes Back, or the Return of the Jedi. So it can be scenarios looked at different ways for B2B and B2C, but just ensure that it's relevant to that crowd, having more visual content and addressing their key parameters of what they want to get from that content. And the next question that most of you might ask, and I believe it should be on top of your minds, is where do these people go to get that content? Yeah, I could make a really good engaging content, but where do I put it on? Is it only webinars? Is it some other place? Is it video blogs? What do I do? So when we check with people, and the first place where they would normally check and where they would normally consume content is blogs. So if your company doesn't have a blog yet, or you don't have a blog yet, start one. That's going to be your first place for people to come and consume content. That can also drive people into sessions where they can listen to you. Second is video platforms. They would love to see things in video. Gone are the times where they would want to read. They would still want to have videos. And the third most aspect is forums. A forum where people are interacting. They are able to see lots of people working towards the same topic, contributing. So they want to be in a very lively scenario where everybody is talking to each other. They're able to build that things out, right? So from this, another question might prop up. Hey, Logmein, you have the wonderful GoToWebinar product. So are webinars dead? We don't think so. Webinars are still a place where people still come and pick up content. The question that you might ask me is, yeah, the new millennial generation might not be doing webinars. Is that true? We don't think so. So one of the studies that we did as a part of this consumption study was to look at how are different generations reacting to content. Because what's happening in a today's scenario is in certain companies, they have two generations of people. Certain companies in BPOs can range up to 4 generations of people, right? So we looked at the top 3 generations and we have been able to build it out. And webinars is still one of the biggest methods in which they would want to consume content. So baby boomers, 43% webinars are popular. Generation X, 47%. Millennials, 44%. So your webinars with the right content is still the best place to go for you to drive your content consumption across these different generations. But if you want to pick up different groups, like what we said for a blog or for a forum, these are the other stats that you can take and start looking at. So if it's video, baby boomers would only love it 39%. whereas a millennial 57%, and the generation X stands in between, right? So it is still a very powerful platform, but if your crowd is more Gen X and millennial, have more videos. If it's a crowd of different generations, have a webinar with more enticing content around animation. What about blogs, right? Blogs are still one place that they go, but not the preferred method for them to consume content in a very live fashion. Millennials love it by 37%. It's popular by 37%. Baby boomer 16%, and usual generation X standing in the middle. But let me give you something that is not in fashion today. Something that we say as a newsletter. Lot of us get lots of newsletters, electronically and physical, and baby boomers love it. 57% love that as a source of information. Millennials 49%, and the generation X 54%. Excuse me. So going back by the methods in which you want to promote content, as long as you're going to have content which is relevant to all the age groups of people, please use newsletters and webinars. If it's going to be the more millennial crowd, use more videos, and have a scenario where you can have that followed up with on demand as well. And the most engaging content is videos, as I told you, second webinars, and third case studies, which is related to the stats bit of it. So if you really want to have a content that's loved by everybody, have lot of content, have video, that would equate to the most lovable content ever. So what am I going to do next is something that I told you in the starting, right? I'm going to give you actionable items that you can take from this session that you can put it to use immediately. Sorry. So let me recap, and I will give you a cheat sheet for you to use it. So we call this the smart marketer's content cheat sheet. What does your content need to have that will make it super smart? First, learning key skills is the motivator. Ensure you have lots of content around that. Relevancy is your top priority. Ensure that the topic that you choose for your target segment is the most relative one. Ensure that you talk about best practices. If you're going to have a B2B session, ensure that you're going to have best practices or cheat sheets like the one that I'm giving you at the end of your session. People can take it and start working on it. Use lists, how-tos, and one-on-ones in your topics so that you can have close to 50 to 60% higher registration. If you do it right, you might even have 100% more. Avoid all your cardinal sins, primarily being it too promotional, too wordy, and very high level where people miss it. Ensure that your content is very, very relative, simple to use, people can look at it, and it is very entertaining. The best content, as I told you, it's very easy to understand, needs to be educational, and it is entertaining. And the last one is executives would love to have traditional media information over the others, and they would love to have rich content and not shallow conversations. So ensure that your content is very focused towards all this. Ensure that your content avoids the cardinal sins. Ensure that there is content for them to look at from an actionable item standpoint that they can use day to day, something like a cheat sheet that I'm showing you, and be very concerned and very relative to your target segment. If it's executive target segment, ensure that it's got more content, very specific to that topic. And if it's a B2C, B2B, ensure that it's more entertaining for them as well. I will leave this slide for in case you guys want to take a snapshot so that you could use it. I'm sure the brand equity team is going to send it back to you in terms of a recording as well. So I can pass it back to the team for you to put your questions in the question pane. And Shubhrajit, back to you.
Thank you, Inigo. I think it was really insightful. While we are, showing the cheat sheet here, we can also share it with the audience later. In the meantime, we will ask our audience. We are already getting a lot of questions, and we'll ask our audience to put in some more. And let's take the questions first.
Sure.
Great. So we have Mr. Amit asking us, what are the other products made by LogMeIn, and is there a repository of these webinars?
So, LogMeIn currently we are a billion-dollar company. We operate in three big clouds: communication and collaboration, one of the clouds to which I belong to, and second is we have a customer engagement and support, which is products in the space of remote support, and in products in the space of chat and AI. We are also an AI company by in that sense. And we also have a third cloud, which is identity and access management, which has products like LastPass, the biggest and the best password management product in the world. And yes, we do in different of these products. We can build in AI. We have repositories in the CNC space, the communication and collab space. For example, as a part of the GoTo webinar, you would get a GoTo stage, which can be your video repository, YouTube for enterprises, which can lead into a scenario where you could generate leads from them and build on it. So I think what we can do for Amit is, if Amit is okay, I can have somebody from the sales team reach out to him and have a conversation around what services do we have and then how we could work with him on different parameters.
Great, thanks, Inigo, for your answer. I think Amit can connect with you guys offline.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question, we have Mr. Avilash asking us, what works best for a B2B content if you are a consultant and active on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so as I told you in the slides before, right? So for a B2B consumer, and if you look at the nature of that consumer, right? That consumer wants to be informative. He needs to have information about his particular topic. And if you look at the emerging trend, people want them to be recognized as thought leaders, which means they're going to be ahead of that curve, of the general curve, by knowing information which is more than what the other people know. So which means if you're going to prepare content on blockchain or AI for that matter, how is it that your content stands out as being more informational, gives them ideas and gives them topics that they could take it back to their circles and make them superstars? So I think you should look at it from that angle. As long as it is informative and it gives them that edge over others, I'm sure that your content is going to be consumed the most. And I'll probably give you an example, right? So as somebody who is in the CNC space, I go and I'm a part of certain blogs which basically talk about technologies that are emerging, which come in from today and which will make an impact in the next few years. That keeps me updated on things that are happening, and those blogs give me that information which I can pass it to my team, and that gives me that thought leader tag. So I think that's the places where people are going to be looking out for that content, and as long as you have that reputation in that space, you would be the best in that space from a content consumption standpoint.
Thanks, Inigo, for your answer. Moving on to the next question, we have Ms. Revati asking us, how frequently should we engage customers with fresh content?
There is no hard and fast rule that we have seen in the industry, but what you should do is, depending upon the relevance of your industry, you should always be in touch, and that relevance varies. So for example, if it's a product, a physical product scenario, the product updates happen, like say, once in a quarter. So ensure that you're at least touching base with your customers once in a month, telling them about what's happening, right? But LogMeIn as a SaaS company, we have lots of new things that are coming out. So invariably, we'll have customer webinars or customer reach outs which are happening once in 3 days, or probably like thrice in a week, from different segments. So I would say it is very relevant to your industry, but ensure that it is in the sweet spot, and you are at least 1 or 2 times better than your industry average.
Great, thanks. Again, moving on to the next question, we have Ms. Vaishali asking us how to have analysis of the content like reachability, results, conversion rates, relevancy, etc. So basically, how to measure them, and is there a software for this?
Yeah, at a very high level, what we have been seeing is there is analytics around the content that's being developed. So, and this is across the industry, irrespective of whether you put it on something like a Facebook Live or YouTube or paid services like us. Yes, that can be given. For example, GoToWebinar does something called as an attentiveness ratio, specifically around in this particular webinar, how attentive was Mr. X, and how attentive and how interactive was he? Was he talking to people? Was he even listening to what I was saying? So there are some statistics that can be derived around content. For example, Go to Stage, as I told you, can also give out analytics around how many times was it viewed, who viewed it, how long did he view, and also a scenario like did he skip through. So for example, if his viewing time on a content which was 10 minutes long, it was only 1 minute, then we knew that he didn't look at all the 10 minutes of the content. He basically skimmed through. So I think different parameters, different products are able to drive that. And if you have something in mind around content that you have, I think we should set up some time and we could have a conversation around that as well.
Great, thanks, Neil. So moving on to the next one, we have Mr. Rahul asking us, which kind of content is more preferred in your domain? Is it the web content or is it the social media content which is like more read, which generates more kind of interest?
So let me categorize this into customer segments, right? So one is if your target segment is going to be executives, people who are going to be taking business decisions, right? If that is the segment of people that you're going to look at, ensure you've got industry news, industry stats, data which is very, very relevant to that particular topic that you're talking, because something that crowd is going to do is going to consume your data. They're going to take decisions basis your data, so which makes the content responsible for those decisions. But if it's going to be content driven towards B2C segment scenarios, or scenarios where it's promotional marketing events, give it more visual content, give it more social media interaction. So for example, you could publicize this particular webinar with hashtags and see how is social media reacting to this as well. So again, different strokes for different people. I think you should look at it from an angle of what's your target segment. But if it's B2C, more visual, more social, with the executive crowd, more information, more animations. But something which is very, very underlying to both the segments is your entire content should be engaging and entertaining. If you miss that piece, then they would log out in a very, very short duration.
Great, thanks. Moving on, we have Mr. Amit Kumar Chauhan asking us about the personal finance space, which he says is very boring for millennials. How can we make peppy content for our readers?
Mhm. Did I hear the question right? It was about personal fragrance, right?
Personal finance.
Or personal finance. Okay. So his question was that's a boring topic, and how do I make it
Yeah, so
engaging?
basically the question was that personal finance is a space which is like very boring for the millennials. So how can Mr. Amit Kumar Chauhan asks how to make peppy content for our readers?
I think I'll go back to the previous answer that I gave you, right? Your target segment is going to be millennials for this, right? And that's the crowd that most probably your segment is going to look at, right? And if that's the target segment, prepare a video on it, prepare blogs around it, prepare visual content around it. Look at running some data around how is it helping, or for example, something that comes out very, very clear is infographics. People say, hey, Mr. X did this and did that, and he saved a lot of money, and he bought a car in the next 3 years, right? That will appeal to that millennial crowd, still B2C. As long as you're going to have lots of videos for that target segment, I'm sure we're going to sell. I'm seeing people in the spaces of insurance, people in the spaces of one level ahead, like medical insurance, where people are able to put some entertaining content where people want to look at. So I don't think any field is boring. It is just that we could look at ways and methods to make that content even more entertaining by making some amazing videos.
Great. Thanks. So moving on to the next question, we have Mr. Rohit asking us, does GoToWebinar give you any reports or analytics?
Yeah, it does. So GoToWebinar is one of the biggest products in its space by market share as well as by functionality, specifically around reporting. So as I told you, we can drill down reports by participant on when he joined, when he or she left, what was the duration he or she was on, were they participating, what was his responses to polls, what was his responses to questions, and it will derive a score of engagement for that particular person for that particular session. It will also derive a session score for the session on a whole. So you can not only mark a participant, you can also mark the trainer on that session, and also scenarios around this can tag back to your marketing systems or your LMS systems. So yeah, it can tag back on attendance and lots of other inbuilt integrations which you don't need to move a finger on. So it's like you set up that webinar from your API calls and everything is done, right? From the session to sending out emailers, reminders, the recording of the file, and scenarios around even reporting. We are also looking at going a little step ahead. We're going to look at doing transcribing of these sessions as a part of our next release, which should come out shortly. So which will then send the transcript out to people as well. So they'll not only have text, but also have speech. So I think you would love the product, and I encourage all of you to go ahead and pick up a free trial and use it as well.
Great, thanks, Inigo. So moving on, we have Rajshri asking us, can you suggest some good platforms for content research to find out what's working and what's not in a given industry?
See, content research is a very broad topic, right? And as I told you, it could be industry specific. There are places where you can pay for content. Again, there are places where you get free content. But I think the first place that I would ask you to go and check is again the places where people said they're finding content, right? First is go to all blogs, all company blogs. So if you're look at the top 5 organizations in your industry, look at the blogs that they are publishing, look at what are they talking. Second is go to all the firms which publish stats or reports, Gartner's or Forrester or Frost and Sullivan and others, right? And look at what are they talking about your particular industry. Pick up those content, right? Third is talk about how are you relevant to those topics. And moment you have all these three, you can actually piece some very amazing content, and you can not only make that content reach your audience, but you can build credibility around it because you will pass credits on that information. And since these are industry leaders stats, people would love your content, and your content research will also give you enough and more goodwill and information for you to go for the next few years as well. But be very careful. The content research needs to be on platforms that you trust, and as I told you, as long as that is set, your content will be consumed. So I think the content research aspect, you still go back to trusted sources, but primarily the blogs and people who publish stats.
Thank you, Inigo. Moving on to the next question. Again, we have Mr. Nikhil Gupta asking us, how can social media play an important role in an era where current millennials have started taking social media detox and are well aware about how advertising works?
Yeah, so okay, let me give you two aspects of this, right? So one of the other things that we do is work with the learning and development teams across some major customers to look at how we can work with them to ensure their inductions and stuff are being taken over, right? And the organizational behavior, we find social media as a very, very powerful scenario, whether it is Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or WhatsApp or anything that you name, it's becoming a learning circle. Some people might do a detox, but that need not be for learning. They may do a detox on Instagram and they would say, okay, I don't want that. But will that be the only source for them to look at for information on the social media platform? Need not be, right? So social media is a very, very powerful tool for the millennial crowd, and it's better that you are available in all the platforms. So worst case scenario is they do a detox on a couple, you're still available on something else. So that's why your blogs, your video content, video repository, and your social media engagement become very, very powerful.
Great, thanks. Moving on, we have Mr. Avilash asking us, which company, according to you, churns out the best B2B content that is share worthy?
Uh, okay, let me put this in a way that it's easier for all of us, right? So one is, I don't think there is one particular organization which is the number one in that space, because as I told you, content comes in from multiple places. It comes from industry, comes from stats, comes from research, and sometimes the research is the number one for a research A is not the number one for research B, right? So again, it's relevance of content and relevance of how people interpret it. So I think what I would still recommend, I'll go back to a previous question that I answered, right? Uh, the sources of information, best places will still be the blogs of your leaders in the space, and second, leading publications who publish reports and the next 5 year, 10 year visions for those industries. So I think if you're reading all this, then you will be able to draw that connecting line, which need not, which may or may not be a common point that the industry agrees upon, right? I'll give you an example, right? For example, most of us think VR will make a big impact, and AR might not. And there is a big scenario where industry is going AR and not too much VR. So again, will virtual reality be the future? We don't know, but there are lots of companies working in that space. Similarly, there are lots of companies, including us, working in the AR space. So these are technologies. This will change, and the content to these technologies will also change with time. So the only solution for that is go to these blogs, read all those blogs, read all the white papers, follow all these articles and stats around those industries, and I think you should be on top of the game.
Great, thank you. We have Mr. Piyush asking us, uh, would you say go-to-suit is a leader, challenger, or a visionary in the communication space?
Okay, let me put it in a way where it's not coming from me, but it's coming from a third party which validates it, right? So Gartner releases a magic quadrant every year, which talks about the collaboration solutions, right? And we have been the leaders in that space for 9 years, and that's closer to the time that from when Gartner started publishing the Magic Quadrant for the solutions, right? So we have been as leaders there, and we consistently have been there for all my products. And if you look at it, we are the only organization who have got multiple products in the same space and not one product. So we look at certain companies, it will be a meeting solution scaling up to do a webinar or scaling up to do a training, but we have got specific products for specific use cases. So when Gartner recognizes us as a leader and for 9 times, I'm sure we are a leader in that space.
Great. So we have a related question to that, and from the same person, and it is about Gartner Magic Quadrant. So he's asking that will you be there for the symposium in November?
I'm available in the symposium in Gartner, and it would be a fun to meet the person. I'm sorry, I missed the name. What was the name?
Yeah, he's Pius.
Okay, so I think you can pass his
Yeah.
credentials on to me, and then I would be more than happy to meet him in the Gartner symposium as well.
Great, thanks. Moving on, we have time for a couple of other questions, a couple of questions more. Uh, so one question is around. Just a second. Yes. One question is around Indian languages, and since we are speaking about content, this question comes in from Rohit again, and he's asking about what solutions do you have when it goes into the traditional languages content.
Um, okay, so one around content in specific language is not something that we do. Most of our content is always English because that's the best that we have. But what we do is there are certain products in our portfolio where we work with people to help them in that journey of the customer journey with different languages, right? So, for example, we have something called a bold chat with an AI engine which can support multiple languages interactions with people. So I think, but we also publish content for specific regions around Portuguese or Spanish specific for regions. But for India, we don't. But that's something that we will be doing, that we should be doing shortly. But for marketers and for people who are doing this, it becomes relevant for some people because some regions consume it in that local language. So again, becomes a preference over choice for most people. And then, but language specific content can get you some brownie points. But when we did the study, I don't think that was a major needle mover for us.
Sure, thanks. So we have time for one last question, and we have Mr. Shivam Mehrotra asking us. I guess that today engagement is something that audience is looking for. So, what is your say?
Can you repeat the question again? I think you talked about video. Am I correct on that?
No, no, no. So basically, the question from Shivam Mehrotra is about engagement, which he says is very important, and the audience is looking for engagement, right? So, what is your say on that? And is there any solutions for
Yeah, so the engagement aspect, whether we like it or not, is going to be the key, and it's going to be the most important driver for people, right? And this engagement need not be only one format, right? So something that like that I use today can be animations, scenarios where people are glued to, hey, what's happening on the screen, right? Scenarios around voice, if you can have a really good voice around that content. Third is the content itself, right? Which can be engaging on saying this is what this was there in X, something like a timeline, right? Which is 1920 to 1940 to 2000s to 2020 to the future. So the content itself can be engaging, and you can do videos around it, right? But engagement is going to be very very key. The attention span of people is very very less, as I told you. But as I reiterated to you, you can get a focused attention of 61 minutes on the webinar platform if you have an engaging content. And it need not be only one format. It need not be only videos or only animations. It can be a combination of that. It can also be the pace at which you're delivering your lecture, slow and fast, and all the other techniques as well. So as long as that is there, your content will be engaging. We have certain contents which are just PPT and just voice, and they have scored far beyond videos of people talking live. So I would say it goes back to content. Content is the key, and if you got the right content, the right way it's packaged, then you'll have the most engaging experience on that content.
Great, thank you, Inigo. I think we'll have to stop here. We for the want of time we can't take any more questions, but I will definitely request our participants to connect with Inigo offline, and they can ask as many questions as they want to. Moving on, with this we come to an end to today's webinar. I would again extend my thanks to Mr. Inigo Praveen for sharing his knowledge and sharing the findings of this content consumption survey with us. Thank you everyone, my participants, for joining us on the webinar today. I really hope that today's learnings will help you better gauge the performance index of your content better. But till the time we meet again, keep reading ET Branded Meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, Satrajit. Pleasure meeting with you all of you again. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.